Good morning friends. In my last two videos of the series on TDS, I have discussed about TDS on salary under section 192 and TDS on contractors under section 194C. Today I will take you through a detailed analysis and understanding of section 194I, that is TDS on rent. So what makes section 194I different from other sections but similar to section 194C, which we discussed about in our earlier video, is that in section 194I2 there are two rates of TDS, but unlike section 194C, the rates depend on the nature of rent and not on the nature of pay. I repeat, what makes section 194I different from other sections but similar to section 194C is that in section 194I also there are two rates of TDS, but unlike section 194C, the rates depend on the nature of rent and not on the nature of pay. So first let's see what section 194I says. Any person not being an individual or a Hindu undivided family, that is HUF, who is responsible for paying to a resident any income by way of rent shall at the time of credit of such income to the account of the payee or at the time of payment thereof in cash or by the issue of check or draft or by any other mode, whichever is earlier, deduct income tax thereon at the rate of 2% for the use of any machinery or plant or equipment and 10% for the use of any land or building, including the factory building or land appurtenant to the building, including factory building or furniture or fittings. Before moving on to the topic further, let's analyze few important aspects from the above provision. At the time of credit of such sum to the account of the payee implies that once the invoice is entered in the books of accounts and the payee is credited, TDS have to be deducted irrespective of whether the payment is made or not. It's then mentioned or at the time of payment, whichever is earlier, which implies that even if advance payment is being made, irrespective of whether the invoice is given or not, TDS have to be deducted on each such advance payment. I repeat, TDS have to be deducted on each such advance payment if the amount crosses the specified threshold limit on the final payment. The third point, it's evident that there are two rates of TDS based on the nature of rent. 2% for plant, machinery or equipment and 1% for land, building or furniture. Now let's see what is the threshold limit for deduction of TDS on payment of rent. The first proviso to the section specifies the threshold limit for deduction of TDS. It says, provided that no deduction shall be made under this section where the amount of such income or as the case may be the aggregate of the amounts of such income credited or paid or likely to be credited or paid during the financial year by the aforesaid person to the account of the payee does not exceed 2,40,000 rupees. So it's clear that the TDS have to be deducted only when the rent amount is more than rupees 2,40,000 in a financial year. Now comes the most important part of the section, the explanation to section 194I, which defines rent. Rent means any payment by whatever name called under any lease, sublease, tenancy or any other agreement or arrangement for the use of land or building or machinery or plant or equipment or furniture or fittings, either separately or together, whether or not all of the above are owned by the payee. I'm repeating the definition. Rent means any payment by whatever name called under any lease, sublease, tenancy or any other agreement or arrangement for the use of land, building, machinery, plant, equipment, furniture or fittings, either separately or together, whether or not or all of the above are owned by the payee. let's discuss some important aspects of the definition. It's not mandatory that the asset given on rent should be owned by the payee. Even subletting lease is also covered. Secondly, the assets should be one which can be classified under any of those which are listed in the definition. So assets which are not listed in the above definition will not be covered by this section. Finally, let's discuss some other key aspects of the section. Applicability of TDS on security deposit. The landlord generally collects security deposit at the time of letting out of the property. TDS is not to be deducted on such security deposit only if the security deposit is refunded back to the tenant at the time of vacating the property. However, if the security deposit is adjusted against the rent, then TDS is deductible on the same under section 194I of the Income Tax Act 1961. Then comes the service charges. TDS is deductible on the service charges payable to the business centers since service charges are covered within the ambit of the term rent. Then comes the hoarding for advertisement. The contract for putting up a hoarding is in the nature of advertising contract and provisions of section 194C would be applicable. I repeat, the contract for putting up a hoarding is in the nature of advertising contract and provisions of section 194C would be applicable. It may, however, be clarified that if a person has taken a particular space on rent and thereafter sublets the same fully or in part for putting up a hoarding, he would be liable to TDS under section 194I and not under section 194C of the Act. I repeat, if a person has taken a particular space on rent and thereafter sublets the same fully or in part for putting up a hoarding, he would be liable to TDS under section 194I and not under section 194C. Then let's discuss rent to hotel for rooms hired. Payments made by persons other than individuals and HUFs for hotel accommodation taken on a regular basis will be in the nature of rent subject to TDS under section 194I. Where earmarked rooms are let out for a specified rate and a specified period, they would be construed to be accommodation made available on regular basis. So I am repeating, what will construe as regular basis? Where earmarked rooms are let out for a specified rate and a specified period, they would be construed to be accommodation made available on regular basis. So if the accommodation is taken on a regular basis, section 194I shall be applicable. Section 194I shall also be applicable where the hotel is under an obligation to provide the occupancy of room wide any agreement. It is to be noted that regular basis has been used in the circular which is given on 8th August 1995, circular number 715, and a one-time rate contract is not covered. The clarity on this matter was later brought out via circular number 5/2002 dated 30th July 2002. So the regular basis is used and not a one-time rate contract. So if it is only for the regular basis use of the rooms, TDS under section 194I will be applicable. Taking this aspect further, in the same circular it has been clarified that where an employee or an individual representing a company like a consultant or an auditor makes a payment for hotel accommodation directly to the hotel as and when he stays there, the question of tax deduction at source would not normally arise since it is the employee or such individual who is making the payment and the company merely reimburses such expenditure. The last example which we want to discuss is hotel hall hired for seminar but payment taken only for lunch. Where hotels do not charge for use of premises but charge only for the catering or the meal, then provisions under section 194I would not apply. However, section 194C would apply for the catering part. So while taking a hall on hire, you have to remember whether the payment is being taken for the premises or for the catering. If it is for the use of premises, section 194I shall be applicable, and if it is only for the catering, section 194C will be applicable, which we discussed earlier. So these were some of the aspects which we discussed to help you gain a better insight of section 194I. For any clarification, you can contact us or comment below. Thank you.